Hello, I'm Katherine Artines. Thanks for joining me for this video showing what's new in the free update 9.68. To begin with, you'll see two new thread collections added. If we use our drop-down for brands, right here you see Exquisite Thread 40 and Exquisite Thread 60. Here we see 40 with all of its many pretty colors. If you bought your software after November 6, 2017, the Exquisite Thread 40 will be the default thread chart, except for vintage software that will still default to the dime vintage thread. If you've had your software for a while, you could certainly make Exquisite your default by going under Tools, General Options. Here we're in Environment, and you see the default palette. Coming down, setting that to your Exquisite Thread 40 and OK. From that point forward, you'll be using that thread collection. Something else new from update version 9.68, if we were to do our File, Save As, those of you saving to Viking Husqvarna can now save in the VP4 format, as you see here. Now let's look at a cool new tool. It's called the Navigator. We'll find it under View, Toolbars. You see it listed right here. We're going to click to activate it. If you take a look over in the bottom right corner of your screen, you see the Navigator tab. It has a tab just like Sequence View and Library, which makes it very easy to access. Let's bring something up on the screen to play with. We'll go into our Library, Perfect Embroidery Pro Free Designs. I'll click once here and bring up Jam onto our screen. I'll click on the Navigator tab, and here you see a blue rectangle that indicates how much of the design screen we see. We also have a slider bar down here. If I click and drag that to the left, you see that I am zooming out. The blue rectangle is larger, showing me the jam in a smaller version. If I take the bar and slide it towards the right, you can see that I am zooming in on the design. Let me come over here and turn on our 3D. And now that I have zoomed in, I can put my mouse on the blue rectangle. You see it turns into a hand similar to our pan tool. And I can drag the blue rectangle up and over to place myself on that portion of the design that I'm trying to zoom into. I can go even larger than that, so that if I wanted to zoom in on just that bow and the knot and see what was going on there, I could do so. Again, I can move that blue rectangle to anywhere on the screen here in the Navigator, and I can see it on my design screen. If I want everything back to the appropriate size, I simply click on the Fit button. I absolutely love this tool. It's a great example of the Inspiration Programming team giving us what we've asked for. From this point forward in my videos, you'll see it active all the time. It's actually the major reason I wanted to do this video on the update, so you could see how handy the Navigator is, rather than just reading about what it's supposed to do. Yes, we've always had the zoom with the magnifying glass and the pan tool, but this Navigator gives us all of those tools on one screen and very easy to use. It's faster for us to get where we want to be. I'll go ahead and delete that jam. We'll play now with another part of the update that's more on the creative side. We're going to come up here to our artwork tool. I'll go ahead and get my rectangle, click and draw the first one, make some changes to it. I will select it, come over here to Properties. I'm going to set it at about 2 inches high. Go ahead and apply that. I'll come back onto the rectangle, do a right click, Convert to Complex Fill. Let's move back over to Properties. The default fill type is Standard. I'll click on the drop down and choose Emboss. It comes in as 100, the pattern. I am going to set the density to a 0.3 and apply. If we look at this first box and we compare the look of the emboss here to that is given to us in the small image for 100, we see that it looks like it should be a crosshatch. Yet if we look at the rectangle itself, we really only see a diagonal row for those embossed areas. What we need to do is come over here to our Shape tool, And when we do that, we see our 4 points in the corner, our stop and start positions, and we also see the angle line indicated here by our small black circles, and then you see that yellow line here going down to the other black circle. By default, the angle line is a 45 degree. And just as a refresher, we've talked about this in a previous video, that angle line is giving us the direction of the stitches. If I were to click on the select and come up here to our slow redraw, bring that bar through that, you can see that the stitching is adhering to the diagonal, that 45 degree angle, and that is exactly how the stitch out is being completed. Once again, let me take the shape key. I have that diagonal angle line. I'm going to click on that black circle and drag it up. Take this one and drag it down so that I have almost a 90 degree angle. I'm watching my box there till I get that 90 and let go. Come over here to apply and I'll click on that, and now you see the look of that embossed pattern as a crosshatch, very similar to the image over here in our pattern box. This is to show you that we have altered the stitching pattern of the design. Now if I were to go into my slow redraw and scroll across, you see that I have changed the direction of the stitches. It is no longer stitching at a 45 degree angle. It is stitching at a 90. It's going from one side to the other in a vertical stitching pattern. In doing that, that is what is making the embossed pattern be displayed. I have always enjoyed using the embossed patterns in PEP, but often would run into a situation where the pattern was too big for the shape that I was filling. This new update version 9.68 has given us more control over those patterns. Let me go ahead and select our rectangle. I'm going to copy and paste it. I'm going to get about 6 rectangles up here for us to play with. I'll go ahead and give myself 3 across and then click and drag to select those 3, do a copy, paste, and drag those 3 down. I'm going to come over here to my Navigator and drag myself back out. I could either use my drag button or simply use the to fit. I now see all 6. The bottom row is still selected. I'll go ahead and change those to red in case I need to reference those. As we click back on the first one, embossed means to have a raised surface design, somewhat in relief. It gives us a sculpted look to our embroidery. Let's take a close-up look at one of our projects. Here you see we'll be doing some letters and how beautiful this texture is in the embossed patterns. This will come from our tree and these come from our letters. Embossing is used only as a fill pattern. Changing the stitch length, which we have up here in properties, does not make the pattern larger. It is this scale percentage that is given to us now in this new update that's going to allow us to change the embossed pattern itself to something larger or smaller. This is at 100%. Let me click on the second one, come over to scale, and I'll raise that to 150 and apply. And here you see the embossed pattern has increased in size. If I click on the last one and come over here and make that a 50% and apply, you see that it gets a lot smaller. Once again, that allows us to have a pattern with a more appropriate size for the shape that we are working with. Let's now take our row here. I'm going to select all the blue. Let's go play with pattern number 205. I'll scroll down a little bit here, choose that and apply. And you can see the differences here. By default, we have the size 100 that's in the leftmost rectangle. It is set at 100. The middle one, remember, we changed to the scale for 150, and then again, that last one was the scale of 50. So you can see the different looks that you have when you play with the scale percentage. We'll take these red ones. I'll click and drag across those. We'll play a little bit with number 274. I'm going to scroll down towards the bottom. We actually have 199 different patterns to choose from. I'll go ahead and click on 274 and apply. With these, we're going to play with the angle. If I click on the first and come back to shape, once again, we see the vertical angle line given, because remember I changed it in that very first design up here and I did the copy paste. So if we were to put this back to the 45 default, somewhere close to that, and I apply, you can see that the design itself is quite different. Here we'll leave it at that vertical. Let's come to the last one and change this angle line to be a horizontal and take a look and see what we have for that design. So here, all three of the red rectangles are in pattern number 274, but the fact that we have played with the angle line, remember this angle line right here is the angle of the stitching, where it starts. Once again, so that you are comfortable with that concept, let's go back into our slow redraw. I'll skip all the blue for right now, but let's take a look at the red. The first one was the diagonal, the middle was the vertical, and the last was the horizontal. So you can see how the stitch direction of each of those is based on the angle line of each of those. Diagonal again, we have a vertical and a horizontal. Changing the stitching direction alters the look of the pattern. If I select all of those red ones once again, we'll play one more time with number 299 all the way at the very bottom of the list here, and I'll apply. As we see the first red rectangle, this is the default at the 45 degree. It looks different from the crosshatch, and the middle one shows us a vertical, the last one shows us a horizontal stitching, and you can see that they're all very fun. It's just a matter of which look do you want to apply to your shape that you are creating. Our text feature also has these complex fill patterns available. Let's get a clean screen, choose our text tool. I'll click on the screen, come up to our text box, type in all caps the word piece. I happen to want the Gaudi font, which is currently chosen. I'll go ahead and OK that. It's on my screen. I'm going to make a couple changes to it. First, I will change the density, so I'll click here, drop that density down to a 0.3. I'm going to make the size 1.4 in height, and I'll go ahead and apply. And then let's come down to our Navigator and use our fit button so that all of my word is on the screen. I'm also going to come over here to our 3D, a realistic preview here, to see what we have. At this height, we see that the satin is a drop satin, which is fine. I might make different choices if I really was going to leave it in this particular font at this size. But what I want to play with now is to come over to our fill. Again, the fill type, we'll use our drop down and choose Emboss, and we'll go ahead and apply. And you see the difference here. We have that fun quilted crosshatch pattern applied to our letters. I'm going to use the Navigator and zoom back out just a little bit so we can see that word better. I will select it. I'm going to do a copy, paste, drag the second piece down, change it to a red. What I'd like to show you now is another brand new option that we have with this update. I'll go ahead and drag my blue box in the Navigator up just a little bit so I can see both words nicely. I have duplicated them so that you can see the change in this option. The red one is selected. Let's go back under our fill, and here is our new option. We know that we have a scale and the angle given to us, but we also have this box right here, the single checkbox. At the moment it has no check in it. Let's go ahead and put that check mark in there and click on apply. And what you see happen is that the embossed pattern now follows the direction of the stitches. It actually puts the design in the center of the letters. It's easy for you to see this if you compare the letter A and C. With the blue is the one without the check in it. We do not have it set up for single. And you can see that the quilting pattern fills up each of those legs. If you take a look at the red one, do you see how the diamond actually goes down the center of the leg of the A, also goes across the center of the bar, and then that diamond has centered itself in the middle of that C. Again, we can see it in the letter E, where here above us the quilting pattern is sort of all over in the blue E, but right here it has centered itself down the vertical and then the horizontal legs. So that's what that particular checkbox will do for us. Pretty cool, yes? Now I could stop here because we've covered the actual new items in this update 9.68. However, the holiday season is coming up and you might need a quick gift or a decoration, so let's keep going for just a bit. We'll start with a clean screen. Where we are headed, we are going to create this particular project where we have standalone letters, in this case spelling out peace. We're going to put a circle in them so that they can be threaded through a ribbon and hung at different lengths to give us this hanging word. We'll come back to PEP, clean screen, and instead of using our text tool, this time we're going to use our File, Import TrueType Text. I'm going to type in the word peace. You, of course, could use any word that you would like. I'll use my ellipse to come in and see my fonts. I want something that is big and chunky, not something narrow. I want a big letter. These letters are going to stand on their own, so I want to be able to see them from a distance and really take advantage of that embossed pattern. I want to show you a little trick here. Right now I have my size set at 120. If I were to come in here and choose, let's say, a 28%, I now can see the sample of Cooper, and actually I want to keep going. The one that I want for this particular project is Gill Sans. So now we see that that is a chunky letter and it is a sans serif. It has no little squiggly lines or anything on them. They're very block. I have it set to a 28. We're going to go ahead and OK that. Bring that to screen with another OK, and here's the size. I know that I want the size of these to be larger. I'm just going to drag my letter piece to be larger, and then I'll drag it so we can see it, and it is in blue. If I zoom in using my Navigator, I'm going to go in quite high and bring that blue box onto the C. Can you tell where I have a little bit of wonkiness going on in that letter? If I click off the letters themselves and choose the C with my shape tool, I have some dents and protrusions and so forth in this particular letter. All right, let's come back out with our fit, and I'm going to do this again. I'll move that up just a little bit. We'll go back under File, Import TrueType Text. Once again, I'm going to type the word peace. Once again, I'm going to go back and get that chunky font that I wanted, that Gill Sans. But this time, instead of putting the point size at the 28, I'm going to really bump it up to a 200. I could go higher. I could make that a 300. I'll bring it to screen. I am going to change it to red so you can see the difference. And right away, that word comes in larger on screen than my blue one. Remember, we had that at a 28 point, and I sized it afterwards. If I bring this in at a larger point, now take a look at this letter C, and you can see how much smoother that one is if I size the TrueType font before I bring it to screen. So if you've ever run into that situation, you might try this alternative to use that point size larger before you bring it to screen. I'll go ahead and come into sequence and select all of my blue and delete that, and we'll play now with our word piece. Remember, all of these are artwork. Go back into my Navigator. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit on each of these first couple of words. You may remember that we need a hole in each of our letters. Let me show you again. See how I have a ribbon going through each of those holes on the letters themselves. That's how I get them to hang. We're going to add that hole. We'll do it by using Artwork Ellipse. I'm going to hold down my Control key and click and drag until I think I have a nice size hole there, the letter O, but it's going to make a hole, and then I'll position it where I'd like it to be. Since I already have zoomed in using my Navigator, I'm going to go ahead and do a copy paste of that hole and drag it over and drop it on the E. I will use my Navigator, my blue box here, and allow myself to do another copy paste, drag that hole over to the A. I am watching where I'm placing it. I'm going to have it on an angle here. If you wanted your letters to hang straight, then you would put these holes in the center of your letters. I have chosen to let them hang at a slight angle, so I put that hole over in the upper left portion of the letter. Now the reason I'm not doing just another paste is because that's going to land on this circle, and I'm using my Navigator to be able to see my other letters. With this one selected, it's just easier if I do the copy paste again, and then I'm right where I need to be to place it in my letters. At this point, I could paste again because I see the letter A and drag it over and drop it where I think it should be on that letter E. Coming down to Navigator and clicking on Fit, I now see that I have a hole for each of my letters. That looks good. The next thing I want to do is to make the hole a part of the letter. I don't want to select all letters and all holes and join them together, because then that becomes one unit, and that's not what I'm after. What I want to do is to select, I'm going to click and drag the letter P and the hole, come over here to our combine key, and now that is treated as one unit. I'll do the same for the E, and again coming up to combine. I also could select the hole, hold down my control key and select the letter A, and do the same thing. Truly your choice. I kind of like just to click and drag and do my combine, and I'll finish that up with the E and a combine. And I know that they're combined because now the hole is the same color as the letter. What this allows me to do is to fill each of these letters, and I will have the holes with no fill in them. I do want to do one other thing before we move on. I'll come over to Sequence View. I'm going to select all of it, do a copy paste, change that color to blue. I'm going to leave these blue as artwork, but for the moment I am going to hide them. I'll come back to that thought in a little while. Right now we want to concentrate on our letters. So I'm going to select the red ones, do a right click, convert to complex fill, come over to my fill type and change that to emboss. I'm going to set the density for each of them to be a 0.3. Come over here and turn on my realistic view. And now we're going to go into each individual letter and have every one of them a little different. So for the P, I am going to leave my 100 pattern, but I'm going to change that angle line. Remember, to get that fun cross-hatch look, we changed our angle to be about a 90 and apply. There is my crosshatch, and I'm going to leave the scale of that at 100. Let's choose the E, come over here and select 107 as my pattern. I am going to change the scale of that to be 75. I'll apply it, and I'm going to leave that default angle line of the 45. Choosing my letter A, I'm coming over to the pattern, making that be 113. Again, changing my scale to be 75. Apply it. That's a nice look, but I'm going to change the angle itself and make that a 90. We'll go ahead and OK it. And I like that look just a little bit better. It gives me more of a chevron kind of look. For the C, we'll choose pattern number 130. Scrolling down just a bit here, 130. I'm going to leave that at 100 and apply it. And I'm actually leaving the default of the 45-degree angle. And then finally the last E, while I see this as the angle line, I'll go ahead and change that to the vertical 90, and I'll come up and have the pattern be 246. So we'll scroll down just a bit here to go find that one. And certainly you could pick your own embossed patterns, whatever you would like. You could also change the angles and so forth. So now all of our letters are very nice. I like the look of them. And again, this is where we're headed, because I know that I'm going to have these letters as standalone and we'll be stitching them on Tool and Wash Away Mesh Stabilizer. I'm going to beef up the underlay for each of them. So once again, I'm going to select all of my letters, come up here under Underlay, It has a perpendicular, but I'm also going to add the full lattice and the edge travel and apply, and that will give me a good foundation on that tulle and wash away mesh. With our letters complete, there is one thing I'd like to do is to increase the size. I'm going to give it as a 1.7 in height. I need to be able to see those letters from a distance. Come back into my Navigator and click on the fit so I can see them. At this point, you can see the size of the design is 8.7 in width and the height is 1.7. We certainly could stitch out in a larger hoop all of these, or I could rearrange the letters so that I can fit them in a smaller hoop. For example, I could take my letter A and position it up at the top, take my CE and position all of those at the bottom. Could even move that E over just a little bit if I'd like to. Come over to our sequence, select all of those, do a right click on my ruler and do a center origin. Now each of these letters are placed within the hoop, but I can now use a 5x7 hoop. So I can save on Tool and Stabilizer, and it gives me just a little bit more control over the design and less waste. Let's take a look at the stitch out steps that I used for these. Here you can see that I have the tulle. I actually have 2 layers of white tulle hoop with a wash away mesh stabilizer, and I've stitched out the letter. I have cut out these 3 letters here. You see them floating, and then the letter A and the letter C are still within the hoop. I actually did multiple hoopings here so I could show you some differences in these steps. But that's about all we need to do, is to hoop up the tulle with the wash away and then stitch out our letters. When you trim, you're going to get close to the stitching without cutting those stitches, and you'll trim away the tulle. You'll then put the letters themselves in a soaking situation to take away the wash away stabilizer. That depends on the manufacturer's directions. I wanted a bit more stability to the freestanding letters, so I used my Silhouette Cameo digital cutter to cut out cardstock letters in the exact same size. Do you remember when we did the artwork and we did the hide? We're going to bring those letters back to screen. Here we see the letters themselves. I'm going to cut those letters, bring them into a new screen and paste. And then remember, we did size those letters to a 1.7. I'll go ahead and apply. Use my Navigator to bring us back to fit the screen. These letters are the exact same size as the ones that we stitched out. However, these are artwork. At this point, all I need to do is a File, Export Artwork, make sure that I'm in my proper folder. Notice that by default it wants to save it as an SVG. I'm going to call that Piece Hanging Letters. And all I would need to do at that point would be to go into my Silhouette software, open those to screen, put my cardstock in my cutter, and have it cut out those letters. And once again, this is what I was given. Once the letters and the cardstock were cut out, I simply glued them together, and that made those letters stand a little bit better in our project. Ribbon was threaded through the holes and cut to different lengths so the letters would hang in an interesting way. You can see here that I have them displayed on a candlestick, on a vase, or on a picture. I actually have words and sayings all over my house. We'll come back into PEP and we'll choose a clean screen. Before we move on, I want to take a look at something a little closer, one of our new items in this free update. To do so, I'm going to open a design that I already have created for us, turn on our 3D here so that we can see what it looks like. And to begin with, I have nothing but these 4 rectangles on screen as we were playing with earlier. And I have all 4 of these set to our pattern 298, and the density has been changed to a 0.3. I have left all of the shape angle lines to the default of 45. Again, to refresh you on that, it is this default angle line you see here in yellow with our black circles set to the 45. What I want to draw to your attention is this new angle here. We have talked about angled lines, and those are the ones that are under our shape tool. But over here in properties, we also have an angle, and that's what I'm referring to down here at the bottom of our rectangles in red. These are the property angles. If I have the first rectangle selected, we see that by default this new feature angle is set to 0, and this is the look that we have. If I select this second rectangle, I'm going to come over to our property angle and change that to a 90 and apply. You see that we are given much more of a distinct embossed pattern when I change this angle. Now, a little refresher here. When we talk about the angle that we get from the shape tool, if I turn that on, I have not altered that. That is still at the default 45. Remember, that angle line is determining the direction of the stitches. This property angle over here simply is controlling the degree of the pattern itself. It is rotating the pattern. It is not rotating this stitch angle. And here I've tried to indicate by the green arrow down at the bottom how this design has been rotated. If you look from angle 0 to angle 90, the pattern itself has been rotated 90 degrees. Therefore, we can see a more distinct pattern. If I select the third rectangle, we see that we want to make that 180. So I'll come over to Properties Angle, make that 180 and apply. We do not see a big difference to the pattern because if you think about it, we went from being a straight 0 to 180, which is also straight. Both of those are horizontal angles. So no change to the look of this rectangle. If I choose the last rectangle and I come over to the property angle and make that 270 and apply, once again it has rotated the pattern of the emboss, and it has rotated it 3 times from our 0. It's gone to 90, 180, back to 270. Both 90 and 270 are a vertical rotation, so that's what allows us to see these images differently. There's no right or wrong here. It's just the tools that we are given. We can combine these tools to get any kind of look that we want. For example, even though this property angle is set to 0, if I go back into my shape and change the angle line to a 90 degrees and apply, I will get a different look, but it's not the same look as I get if I leave the default shape angle line at 45 and I simply change the property angle. Now this might be just a little bit advanced for some of you that aren't used to playing with embossed in, but for those of you that want a little bit more advanced features in your software, Perfect Embroidery Pro always gives you that. So once again, we have tools and we can combine those tools to get the look that we are after. Let's take a look at our next project. Here we have a little preview of what we're going to be creating. We'll come back into PEP, come into a clean screen. We're going to start with our symbols, coming up here and doing a select. I'm looking for the Christmas tree, which is selected right here for us. We'll go ahead and do an OK. And I simply click and drag the tree as large as I think I'd like it. At the moment, it's not a big deal because I'm going to come over here to size. And I know that I want this tree 3.75 so that it's large enough to fit in my 4x4 hoop. I'll use the Navigator in the fit screen. I see some issue with the satin at the tree this large. That is not a concern of mine. All I really want is the shape of the tree. I went under symbols this time. Very often when we're playing with artwork, I take you to the internet or tell you to go look for something, but when you have so much at your fingertips in Perfect Embroidery Pro. The symbols are made to be small, but I can bring them this large because I'm going to do a right-click, Utility, Create Outline, set that to a 0 distance, and OK it. Coming over to our sequence, here is my artwork of the tree. I'll now select the tree and delete it from the keyboard, and it has given me artwork to play with. So again, you have lots and lots to play with under those symbols. We could turn this tree into one embossed complex fill, which would be nice, but we're going to take it up a notch and do a couple things to make it a bit more interesting. We are going to divide this tree into 3 areas. So first, let's come over to Navigator, and I'm going to zoom in just a little bit on the body of the tree. I'll come over here and use my slice tool. You must have the object selected first for slice to be available to us. Click and drag over a bit to the other side and let go. And then for the bottom, click and drag over and let go. Now I have 3 areas. Let me do a right click, choose my select key, come over here to our break apart tool. It has done just that. If I take that middle portion over, do you see what has happened here? When you use the slice tool, it automatically closes each of the areas. So it's given me that bottom line here and the top line here, and that middle portion is a closed area. I'll go ahead and do an undo to put that middle portion back. Now we're going to get a little fancier. I'll zoom in again. My middle area is the one that is selected. I'm going to go ahead and change that to a red just so that you can see the difference here. I'll turn on my shape tool and I'm going to do a right click, add a point, right click line, and drag that point up just a little bit so I have some interest between the top portion and the middle portion. I'll do the same down here. So I will right click, add a point, right click, make it a line, and click and drag up in that area. I could even move that point over if I don't want it so symmetrical. And I'll go ahead and apply, and you can see now that this middle area, the red area, has changed in its shape. But I need the top portion to match this as well. So with it selected under my shape tool, I'll do a right click, add point. Oops, I forgot to make that a line, so I'll do that right now. And I'll come up just a little above that area. Actually, no, I want it just a little below that area so we have an overlap. And then I need to do the same for this lower portion. So select it, right click, add a point, right click, line, and I will drag that up and above that area just a little bit. So I have a little bit of overlap in that area. And again, I will apply. Let's use a fit from our Navigator. And now we're going to select all 3. I'm going to right click, convert to complex fill. I don't care that I have a blue and red tree at the moment. Let's come over to fill type, choose embossed. The pattern that I want is 121, so we'll scroll down and choose that. I know that I want my density to be a 0.3 and apply. I like the look of that. To me, it looks a little woodsy going on. So now let's fix each individual area. We'll start at the bottom. I know I want this to be a dark green color, so I'll right click on that. I'm going to leave it at 100% scale. For the middle, I'll choose, which is now red. I know that I want that to be a lighter green. I'll go ahead and use this 10 color. Come over to scale. I'm going to make that a 75 and click on apply. For the top of the tree, I'll change it from blue to a light green by doing a right click, and I'll make that scale a 60%, and we'll go ahead and apply. And you can see what we've done here is that we've made this tree a little bit more interesting in a variegated situation with our colors, and we also have just a little offsets to the areas themselves. At this point, I would save this tree. I would do a file save it as my C2S, so that at any point in the future I could come back to this position for our project. For now, we know that we want this tree to be a napkin holder and a place card, so I need to give it an initial and holes. Once again, if we take a look at where we're headed, you can see that I have holes in this tree to allow myself to thread in a ribbon or a pretty cording or something to that effect. So we'll come back to our tree. We have saved the tree. We are now going to add holes, and I'll do that by simply using a rectangle from my artwork. I'll click and drag a rectangle, select it, come over to size, and I know that I wanted a different width and height, so I'll take off the maintain aspect ratio. The width I want at a 0.05, come back into a 0.5, and the height I want that to be a 0.5. So I'm making it very narrow and a little taller. Right click, convert it to a complex fill, change that density to a 3, and I'm also going to change the color so you can see it a little better. And I have nothing but a line of complex fill. So at this point, I'll drag it over here. I'm going to do a copy, paste, because I need one on either side. I'll just drag that one here because we're going to use the Navigator to zoom in into our area. I will click and drag that rectangle. Remember, this is going to represent my hole, and I'll position it where I think it would work best. And I'll click and do this one also. I can't put them in exact same position because both sides of the tree are just a little different. I will select both of the blue. The easiest way for me to do that is come back into sequence and select the color. I want them in a vertical center align so that they're across from each other. Right click, come down to Utility, and ask to remove the overlap. If I move them out of the way, you see that that's exactly what has happened. Because I filled that rectangle with a complex fill and I placed it over existing stitches, that remove overlap gave me the hole underneath each of them. Let me click on the undo so that it puts it back in the position, because now I'm going to do a right click, convert to tackle twill, come over here to the width and make that a 1.5. I'll make the density a 0.5 and apply. And you can see what I've done here is just to give some covering for those openings. It might look a little funny. Let me come over to Navigator, come back to Fit. It looks funny because they're blue. If I go ahead and make that the same color as the dark part of the tree, you can't even see them. So now we have our holes for our ribbon. We have one last thing, and that's to add our text. I'll come up to my text tool, click on my screen, come into my text box. I'm going to use the letter P. I am going to still use the Goudy font that we used before, so I'll go ahead and apply. Here's my letter P. I'm going to change the color though so we can see it a little bit more easily. Come up to our fill. Standard will be changed to Emboss. I'm going to use this default of 100. Going to come over to size. I am going to put my maintain aspect ratio back on and change the height to a 1.25 and apply. Using my Navigator, if necessary, I can click and drag that letter and place it where I think it would look the best. Maybe move over just a little bit. And let me check that. I do want to make the density a 0.3. Little fuller. Again, need to go back into my embossed. I think I forgot to do that part to apply. And here's my fun letter in there. I am going to do that same trick. I'll select it. I must make sure that the P is where I want it to be. I'll do a right click, Utility, Remove Overlaps. And it has done just that. Again, it's given me that hole there in the middle. I'll go ahead and undo and put that P back just to make sure, because there is a lot of dense stitching with this tree and the letter and so forth. I'm going to come over here to my push-pull, set the type to be percentage, and set that percentage to a 120. And what I'm doing there is just sort of hedging my bets, making sure that I won't have any opening showing between my letter P and all the stitching of that tree. That looks pretty nice. I like it. So now let's go and take a look at our embroidery steps. I did this particular project on felt. Now, I didn't use the kind of craft felt that you can see through, the less expensive craft felt that comes in rectangles. Rather, I used a felt that had a bit of wool to it. It doesn't have to be 100% wool blend, but this way I can hoop just the felt. I didn't even need to use stabilizer underneath that, just the felt. And then once the design is stitched, I have here a choice for you how you want to trim. If you want to trim away from the design, you'll get this type of look, or trimming closer to the tree and following the outlines of the tree. This is actually the look that I used. You can do what you prefer. Once again, let's take a look at the final project, and you can see again by running that ribbon through the holes that we've created, we can have this represent our napkin holder, which is also a name place card, if you will, with our letters, or you can use it for strict decoration as I did on the candle. I have mentioned push-pull in this video. If you need some additional information about that topic, you might want to revisit the 2017 January video. I also have a video on making your own custom embossed patterns, and that was 2016 in September. So you could revisit both of those videos on the Inspired by Dime YouTube channel. I encourage you to play with your new tools given in this free update version 9.68. We have been given scalable embossed patterns. We have also been given this great Navigator tool. I know you will come up with your own fun projects using them. Happy holidays, everyone. Enjoy.